Okay, well, I've recently been watching a video by TJ3 History, guys talking about the Liberator, the story of Lady Be Good. It was a Second World War bomber story. And what happened is the crew of the B-24 took off from Benghazi, which is in North Africa, and they flew to Naples, dropped some bombs, that was their mission, and they fly back to Benghazi. And to cut the story short, they flew straight past Benghazi and they flew off into the desert for hundreds of miles, and then the aircraft came to grief in the desert somewhere. They bailed out, I think. And I'm going to show you now what they did wrong. Okay, I'm not trying to lay blame anywhere, I'm just trying to point out what the obvious is. And if you go to skyvector.com, I have it on here. You can do the calculations for yourself. You can put yourself in Benghazi. You can draw a line. You can flight plan it from Hotel Lima Bravo, which is Benghazi International Airport, to Lima India Romeo November, which is Naples. Okay, so that gives you a heading of 329 degrees, and it's a 600 nautical mile route. Now I went on to Wikipedia and went into the consolidated B-24 Liberator, and I got a cruising speed of 215 knots. Okay, so we put 215 knots into our calculations, and that gives us an estimated time of arrival over 600 miles at 2 hours 58 minutes. So call it 3 hours. Okay, so it takes you 3 hours to get from Benghazi to Naples. Okay. Now the wind is a consideration. Obviously, if you've got a headwind, it'll take you a little bit longer to get there. If you've got a tailwind, it'll get you there a little bit quicker. But generally, as a ballpark figure, 3 hours is the nub of this, what I'm trying to say. So if it takes you 3 hours to get there, it's going to take you 3 hours to get back. If you're going to head back on what's the reciprocal heading of, it's 149, call it 150. Okay, it's going to take you 3 hours. So this is why it's important for someone to be awake and noting the time. Okay, because if we've set off from Naples and we're coming back, that's what the navigator's doing with his navigator watch. Look, it's coming back down that route, 3 hours. He's not going to fly for 5 hours. He's going to fly for 3 hours. So when it gets to 3 hours, he says, right, we're here. Can't see anything. Right. Get on the radio. Now is not the time to continue flying into the desert for another couple of hours. Okay. The pilot should have known that. He should have known it was 3 hours there. It's going to be 3 hours coming back. Should have made a note. Navigator should have been making a note. So there's the pilot, the co-pilot, and the navigator, all three of them messed up on this one, because there's no excuse for flying 3 hours back to Benghazi and then flying off into the desert, because you just haven't taken a time reading, written the time down when you set off back, because it's just 3 hours later. All you've got to do is stay on heading at the same speed for 3 hours and you'll be there. Or you won't be far away from where you're supposed to be when you get there, but you don't continue flying until the thing runs out of fuel. And you end up hundreds and hundreds of miles away to the south of Benghazi, in the middle of the desert. It's a very sad story, it is, but it's don't forget, these guys were very young. They were kids, really, and they hadn't had much experience. And time is the critical thing with airplanes, heading and time. Now, another important factor to take into account is the actual range of the aircraft. It was 600 miles to Naples, 600 miles back, there's 1,200 miles. And according to Wikipedia, the consolidated B-24 Liberator with the maximum bomb load had a range of 1,540 miles. So there's the 1,200 used up, and you've got a few hundred miles extra to wander off into the desert with. So the nub of the story is, when your 3 hours are up, it's very important someone writes the time down and the counting away, because when you get 3 hours is up, you should be there. So when you get there, you're calling on the radio, and he actually called his base, and the base answered him, and they let flares off, but he'd already gone past the base by this stage, so he's looking forward into the night. and he doesn't see any flares because the flares are behind him. Okay, and then he loses contact with the base. So if he'd been watching his watch and he'd known there was 3 hours had passed and he's now into 4 hours, chances are the base is behind him. So you would not keep flying until the thing runs out of fuel and you just bail out. That's tragic, and that's just down to inexperience, I think. Which is a great shame in this case, because they made a very concerted effort to walk north once they realised they were not over the sea, they were over the sand. So obviously north is the way to go, and they walked north as far as they could until they just ran out of water.